Hey everybody, welcome back to NYY Recaps, the first hot stove edition of NYY Recaps. Congratulations to the Los Angeles Dodgers, and to any Dodgers fans who may be watching. They win the 2020 Corona Ball Championship, and it just goes to show you that the moves you make during the hot stove league that we're entering now can really make a difference in putting your team over the top. The Dodgers were not afraid to invest heavily. They go out and they get Mookie Betts. They sign him to that big contract. They also take on the contract of David Price, flexing their financial muscle. And what happens? They win the World Series. Now, obviously, the Rays did it a different way. They did it by piecing together the right guys via analytics, developing young pitchers, and just having a really good, solid team that, was really tough to beat. And they obviously polished off the Yankees in 5 games and then beat the Astros and gave the Dodgers a good run for their money. But the Rays have been eliminated, and the Dodgers are your 2020 World Series. So the Yankees now begin the next season, which is the Hot Stove League, preparing your team, preparing your roster, constructing your roster, evaluating what you did wrong in the previous season, trying to address those issues and make your team better for 2021. In this episode of the podcast, I'm going to go through the money that the Yankees have coming off the books, which is a significant amount. I'm going to talk a little bit about their rotation options for 2021. Guys like Masahiro Tanaka, James Paxton. Do you bring them back? Do you go out and get a Trevor Bauer? Do you go out and get a Liam Hendricks or a Marcus Stroman? What do you do with Clark Schmidt? Guys like that. Davy Garcia, will he be a part of the rotation? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about DJ LeMahieu's value. He's a free agent, and he's been underpaid the last 2 years, so you're going to have to invest heavily in him if you want to bring him back. And that is also going to lead to a discussion about Gleyber Torres. I mean, can he play shortstop next year, or do you have to move him back to second? It's a really interesting situation. The Yankees have a lot of ways that they can construct this roster next year and still be really, really good. But to me, the key is always going to be pitching. So I'm going to focus mostly on the rotation issues in this episode of the podcast. But first things first, let's talk about the money the Yankees have coming off the books. James Paxton, he obviously had elbow and back issues this year, did not have a great year. When he's right, he's one of the better left-handed pitchers in all of baseball, but he made $12.5 million this year. And honestly, I don't think the Yankees should pay that much for him if they choose to bring him back. Would not surprise me if the Yankees offer him a $7 to $8 million one-year contract. Go out and prove that you're healthy. But I don't think he'll take it. I think he's going to hold out to try and get a 3 to 4 year contract from somebody. It might be difficult because of those injury issues, but either way, $12.5 million coming off the books. The Yankees can figure out how they want to spend that. Masahiro Tanaka's 7-year, $155 million contract is over, freeing up $23 million. Would not surprise me if they brought Tanaka back. I thought he was really consistent this year. He was, pretty solid until you got to the postseason. But really, the Yankees need arms that can win in the postseason. Tanaka in the past has been better during the postseason, but this year, not so much. $23 million coming off the books. As much as I like Tanaka, one of my favorite coffee mugs is a Masahiro Tanaka coffee mug. As much as I like him, I think it's time to let him go pitch somewhere else and finish out his career. Free up that money for a younger arm. DJ LeMahieu, $12 million. He signed a 2-year, $24 million contract before last season. And obviously 2 years in a row, he's been really, really good for the Yankees. Won the batting title this year. He's a guy who's going to hit for a high average, plays the game the right way. He hustles. He's a clubhouse leader. Great on defense. He can play all over the infield. He gets big hits. He's a clutch hitter. He's got power. I think you got to just ante up and pay the man what he wants. He's going to ask for a 4 to 5 year deal at $25 million. Maybe there's some room to negotiate because he is over 30, but you're probably going to have to pay him north of $20 million. So, in my opinion, signing DJ LeMahieu, getting that contract out of the way is your number one priority. They should try and do it before he becomes a free agent. It would not surprise me if they've already been negotiating with him. But honestly, at this point, if you're DJ LeMahieu, you've already made it through the contract. Why not test free agency? Solicit offers from other teams, and it might drive your price up. But unfortunately, that means the Yankees might not contend for him if the price gets higher than they want to pay, even though he is a great player. J. Happ made $17 million this year. It's hard for me to imagine that the Yankees will bring J. Happ back on any kind of a big contract like this. Wouldn't surprise me if they make him a lowball offer, maybe 1 year, $8 million as a back end of the rotation guy, as they try and work guys like Clark Schmidt into the big leagues. As you've had guys that have had injuries, he's not a bad guy to have for depth. He was pretty good during the regular season. Of course, he crapped the bed during the postseason in Game 2 when he came in to relieve for Davy Garcia in one of the weirdest moves of the entire year. And from what I've heard, from everything I've heard, he wasn't really on board with the move. He basically went along with it, because he's a team guy, but he voiced his opposition to coming in later in the game. Even though he's done it in the past, he just didn't execute. And that tells me that maybe his heart wasn't in it. Maybe he wasn't focused. Maybe a little bit selfish on his part. But, if the guy's more comfortable starting, the guy's more comfortable starting. You have to listen to him as a coaching staff as well. How many times has he come in relief all year? I don't think he'd pitched in relief much, if at all. So you have to listen to him. You have to listen to your players. That's a mistake Joe Girardi made with Sanchez during Game 2 of the 2017 2017 ALDS against the Indians. There was a play where there was an up and in pitch to Lindor, or I think it was Lindor, but it was a lefty, and it looked like the pitch hit him or hit the knob of the bat. And Gary Sanchez told Joe Girardi, hey, why don't you challenge this? And Joe Girardi ignored him. And the replay clearly showed that the ball hit the knob of the bat. So Girardi doesn't challenge. 2 pitches later is a grand slam. Him not listening to his players really cost the Yankees there. So you got to listen to your players. If J-Happ says, I'm not comfortable doing this, I'm not really on board, in the playoffs in Game 2, you got to be really on board. Everybody's got to be pulling on the same rope. So, it's not just J-Happ's fault that he failed in that situation. It's the Yankees' fault for putting him in that situation and for not listening to him. They've also got Jacoby Ellsbury finally coming off of the books, $5 million. And Brett Gardner, he's got a $10 million option, but he made $7.5 million this year, and he is likely not going to be re-signed. If they do re-sign him, it'll be for like $2 or $3 million, maybe $4 million. It's time to give him a pay cut, let's be honest. He did not perform well this year. Was pretty good during the playoffs, but during the actual regular season, didn't do much. Now, usually when the Yankees have a ton of money coming off the books, you can expect them to be big players in the free agent market. But that may not happen this year. Just because of coronavirus, the Yankees lost a lot of revenue from their fans. Everybody did. And so you're probably going to see contracts be a bit smaller this year anyway, just because teams are somewhat hurting for money. But I do think the Yankees are going to have to address the rotation if they want to be in position to beat the Rays next year. The Rays are not going anywhere. The Rays have a really good pitching staff, a lot of young pitchers, Snell, Glass now. Morton's a bit older, but I'm sure they've got somebody in the minor leagues who's getting ready to come up. They have Wander Franco, who is pretty much a can't-miss prospect who's going to come up and play the infield for them. He's basically their version of like a Lindor. He's a switch hitter, I believe. He's got power, he's a good defensive player, and he's young. I think he's only about 20, 21 years old. So the Rays are not going anywhere. They're going to get better. So the Yankees are going to need to be able to pitch with them, basically, because they couldn't pitch with that Rays bullpen. But they might be able to pitch with that Rays rotation. It's time to go big. It's time to really invest. You've got all this money coming off the books. There's 3 big-time starting pitchers out there. There's Trevor Bauer, who's the guy I personally want just because he's got the most electric stuff. He's got a mid to upper 90s fastball, got a really good overhand curveball, got a good changeup. He can cut the ball. He's got a live arm. He wants to pitch every 4th day. I mean, come on. He's really in tune with the analytics, so I think he's going to mesh really well with Matt Blake, our pitching coach. But there's always the whole, potential feud between Trevor Bauer and Garrett Cole. And to his credit, Trevor Bauer said that's not really a thing. He said that they may have, a long time ago in ancient history not gotten along well, but, it's really ancient history. They're both rich. They're both superstars at this point. Nobody cares about your college feud at this point. But there's also Marcus Stroman. Marcus Stroman actually called out the Yankees on Twitter saying that nobody else they have besides Garrett Cole is in his league as a pitcher. And you know what? He wasn't wrong. He really wasn't wrong. Marcus Stroman, though, here's the problem with Marcus Stroman. He's a shorter guy. He's at Davy Garcia's height, basically. And I'd be careful putting two short pitchers in the same rotation because of a couple of reasons. One, short pitchers are more prone to break down because you have to generate more leverage, right? You have to put in more effort to throw as hard as you do, to be a big league pitcher. And with a smaller body, it's just going to put more strain on your arm, on your shoulder. You see a lot of short guys have shoulder problems. I'm one of them. But he's also, a really good pitcher. He might be able to, do something like Johnny Cueto, where he reinvents himself as he gets older. He won't be as expensive as a guy like Trevor Bauer. But I don't think the Yankees are going to go after Mark Stroman just because I just feel like he's been pitching in the AL East a long time. And the teams have seen him. And let's not forget, the Yankees do have Luis Severino coming back next year. He won't be back until June or July at the earliest. But when he comes back, what type of pitcher can you count on him to be? Is he going to be that guy from 2017, 2018 who was really, really good and was the Yankees' ace in the postseason? Or is he going to be a guy who is struggling with his command, struggling to come back from basically missing 2 entire years? It's really tough to have sharp command after missing 2 seasons. But if anybody can do it, Luis Severino can do it. He's young. He's got a great arm. He's got a great staff to work with. And if we have Luis Severino healthy for the postseason, that really gives you a number 2 right behind Garrett Cole. So you're going to have Garrett Cole, Luis Severino. You're going to have one of Davy Garcia or Jordan Montgomery in the rotation just because they're cheap. You might have both of them in there. Improve that bullpen. Really stretch out the amount of dominant innings that you can get to begin the game. I'm still not convinced that Aroldis Chapman is the guy that you want in the 9th inning. I get that over a large sample size, his numbers are pretty good, but it seems like he chokes every year in the playoffs, and I just don't trust him in big spots. I don't. So he makes $15, $16 million. You might be able to unload that contract. Kelly Jansen wasn't great for the Dodgers. Maybe the Dodgers say, hey, give us Chapman. Give us another option. They can take on that money, and maybe they give you back one of their young pitchers. I don't know how that works, but if I'm the Yankees, I try to unload Aroldis Chapman's contract and rework the bullpen. Maybe reallocate some of the money in the bullpen. You can get a couple of pretty good young pitchers for the money that you're spending on Chapman. And then you can slide Zach Britton in there as your closer. He's done it in the past. He's really consistent. He had a really good year with the Yankees. He's under contract for next year. They have an option on him. So I feel like the Yankees might be able to save a bit more money there and still reinvest it. But either way, it's really time to spend because you've got so much money coming off the books. I don't want to hear about coronavirus. You're going to sell out every game next year because nobody did shit all summer. Everybody wants to get out and get to the ballpark. People are anxious to see live sports again. I feel like you have one of your biggest years of all time next year as long as we get the virus under control. And it sounds like to me that, a few different companies are really close to having a vaccine. And once that's out, all bets are off, baby. Get fans back in the stands. And I mentioned this earlier, but one thing that's really going to complicate how the Yankees allocate their money this year is what DJ LeMahieu commands in free agency. Obviously, you can offer him a qualified offer, which the Yankees will do. He made, $12 million last year and the year before. I think a qualified offer is $18.1 million. So that's really a $6 million raise if he accepts it. But I don't think he will because his value is probably 5 years, $120 million. For somebody who plays defense as well as he does and can win you a batting title and can hit in the clutch as he's shown on multiple occasions and who's a good clubhouse guy, he's got a lot of value. He's a fan favorite. I mean, just look how many people have become DJ LeMahieu fans over the last couple of years that probably didn't know who he was when the Yankees signed him. DJ LeMahieu? And now he's one of the Yankees' best players. He's pretty much been their team MVP 2 years in a row. So you've got to re-sign him. You can count on him getting a significant raise. Will he get $25 million? I don't know. He's probably going to ask for $25 million, but you might be able to talk him into $20, $21 million. And then it's only like an $8 or $9 million raise, right? So that eats up basically the money that you were going to pay for Brett Gardner, $7.5 million plus part of Jacoby Ellsbury's. You've still got Paxton's contract. You've still got Tanaka's contract. I think they're going to try and keep that money in the rotation and then just try and allocate some other funds to getting DJ LeMahieu back. But in my opinion, he's worth over $100 million because he's been so consistent. And when he was out of the lineup, look what the Yankees did. I don't think they won a single game with him out of the lineup. You've got to re-sign DJ LeMahieu, and you've got to do it quickly because that gives you an idea of the amount of money that you have working with for free agency. So I think that one thing that you're going to see is the Yankees go all in on DJ LeMahieu right away, probably before the free agency period begins. To convince him to forego free agency, you're going to have to give him probably a no trade clause. You're going to have to give him probably an extra year on the contract. So look for 4 to 5 years for DJ LeMahieu, and he'll probably finish out his career as a Yankee. And sorry, that was my watch tinging. Hopefully that you didn't hear that. The next problem that the Yankees are going to have to figure out is what to do at catcher. I know that JT Realmuto is a free agent. He's one of the best catchers in all of baseball. And the Yankees have had some trouble at the catcher position this year. Thankfully, Eric Kratz came in and saved the day when Gary Sanchez couldn't hit anything and Kyle Higashioka was on the injured list. But I'll tell you what, I became really, really impressed with Kyle Higashioka this year. He's looked pretty good to me since he's come up. And if you remember, he started his career probably 0 for 15, 0 for 18, something like that. And then his first 3 hits were home runs. So you knew right away that he had power. He showed that again this year. But he's also great behind the plate defensively. Garrett Cole preferred to throw to him. He's got a rifle for an arm. And he is a wall back there. He can stop anything in the dirt. He steers that ball back towards home plate. He made a couple of bonehead plays on the bases and things like that, but he's a young player. I think Kyle Higashioka is going to develop into a JT Realmuto type of player. Not yet, but in a couple years, if you start him, he could be a guy that hits 260, 270, hits 20, 25 home runs, and plays good defense. And to me, that is a good catcher. I don't want a guy who's going to hit 180. I'm sorry. Some people really don't care about batting average. They only care about home runs. They see that Gary Sanchez hit a bunch of home runs, and Gary Sanchez was pretty good at framing the ball. But Gary Sanchez cannot stop balls in the dirt, and he strikes out way too much. It showed me a lot that the Yankees chose to bench him during the playoffs, right? They must have thought that Kyle Higashioka gave them a better chance to win the World Series as their starting catcher than Gary Sanchez. That is not something we should overlook. In my opinion, Gary Sanchez, who was due a raise, who's probably going to make $7, $8, $9 million just based on service time, he's a prime candidate for a trade. Maybe you can deal him and get a catching prospect and just hand the keys to Kyle Higashioka behind the plate. That'll save you a little bit more money that you can apply somewhere else. Maybe give that saved money to DJ LeMahieu as part of his contract. That way you allocate some of that money still towards the offense, and then you can still allocate separate funds that have come out of the rotation back into the rotation. So I really feel like the Yankees need to solve that Gary Sanchez dilemma, and they need to do it quickly and not let it draw out. All right, so let's take a look at the 2021 regular season schedule. You'll see that it begins a bit later this year. It begins on April 1st. We've seen it begin in March the last few years, in late March. Obviously, this year didn't begin until July, but it was scheduled to begin, I think, in late March. So it's beginning on April 1st at home against Toronto, and then they have Baltimore, 2 pretty fun teams to play. Toronto's got a very good young team. They're going to give the Yankees some trouble. And Baltimore is fun because you beat up on them. But then you get Tampa Bay in Tampa Bay, and then Toronto in Toronto, and then Tampa Bay at home, and then Atlanta, then Cleveland. So before you finish off with Baltimore and then Detroit, who haven't been very good. So the season begins with some kind of ups and downs. It's going to be a pretty tough April, so you've got to get off to a good start. And then in May, you get Houston, who's tough. Washington's going to be tough. Juan Soto kills the Yankees. Then back to Tampa Bay and Baltimore. And then they go to Texas for the first time, where they just played the World Series. And then the White Sox at home. Toronto at home. Detroit on the road before Tampa Bay and Boston at home. And then they have Minnesota in Minnesota. Then they go to Philadelphia, Toronto, and then they play Oakland at home, and then Kansas City, Boston on the road before coming back to play the Angels at home. The Mets at home in July, followed by Seattle and Houston on a West Coast trip. Then, of course, the All-Star break, and then Boston at home. And then Philadelphia comes to New York, and then you go to Boston, Tampa Bay, Miami. Then you're in Baltimore, then you're at home against Baltimore, then Seattle, and then KC comes to town. And then looks like the 13th, 14th, 15th in August, they're scheduled to play the White Sox on the road. I wonder if that's going to be the, since they're in Kansas City prior, and then they have a day off, a travel day. I wonder if one of those days is going to be the Field of Dreams game, maybe on the 13th of August. Would not surprise me, a Friday night Field of Dreams game or Field of Dreams series. And then Boston, Minnesota at home, and then Atlanta, Oakland, the Angels on the road, and then you finish up in September and October, Baltimore and Toronto at home, the Mets on the road, pretty much like a home game. Baltimore also pretty much like a home game the way the Yankees play there, and then back home against Cleveland and Texas, and then you play Boston, Toronto, and then round it out versus Tampa Bay. So right away, the Yankees start off with a test against Toronto. So hopefully they can load up on that rotation, solidify the offense. I will be back with a top 5 offseason priorities video pretty soon. Send me in the comments, send me your top priorities for the offseason, and I'll consider them for the video. I'll try and pick some of the best ones.
If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. It helps YouTube suggest this channel to other Yankees fans.